Hello, once again, my friends. Welcome to Spiritism, a closer look. You are on Kardec Radio. I'm Luiz Lima, your host for tonight. If you have any questions, any comments, if you want us to bring some topics for discussion, you have the information down on your screen. You can always write to us via email or just log on to Kardec Radio or our Facebook page. So feel free to do it. And tonight, we're gonna talk about Jesus and the law. That's at least for me, it's a very, very interesting, at the same time, challenging subject because he's above all of us when it comes to law. So it's very, very challenging. So I'm gonna need help to talk about it, and I'm gonna bring help, and the help that I'm gonna bring is the best help you can get on the subject. Here is Mackenzie Melo. Mackenzie, how are you?
I don't know about the best, but I think I have the best friend because I mean, uh, thank you, Luis, for inviting me. It's really good to be here on your Wednesday's show from Kardec Radio. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about this topic,
isn't,
Jesus and the law.
isn't it challenging? It is for me, isn't it? A beautiful topic.
It is, and maybe so that we can already start talking about it.
I'm
Maybe
listening.
that's why Kardec put it as the first chapter of the Gospel according to Spiritism,
Right. Hmm.
and which is very, very sane. And knowing how Kardec was organized and how everything that he does has a purpose and has an objective, has
A
a
method.
final goal, a method, and we see this on all books actually. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, actually being in the middle of the five big books of the codification is very, very sane, right? We came from the Spirit's book with all the parts and all the books within the book, right?
Mhm.
Which
Mhm.
they close a cycle within itself, and then he expands this cycle outside of the Spirit's book into the other books, and of course, without forgetting, and Luis said that I am the best to talk about this. I'm going to tell you that, and I told this to him already, and I think I mentioned it here in another program too. One of the best lectures or the best studies about the codification as or the body of work of Kardec was from Luis when he put together like a study showing how important it is also the Spiritist magazine into this study of Spiritism too, showing how big and wide the spread of the Spiritist magazine is and being so much bigger than the codification itself. So we have lots of stuff to talk about, but it's very interesting that, and then you go to the medium's book where we have a method inside, and there's a
Mhm.
chapter
Yeah.
also talking about methodology of studying, and then we go to the Gospel according to Spiritism, and we start the book, the chapters, not the books. We're not going
Yeah.
to talk about
Yeah.
the book itself, but we start the first chapter with talking about I have not come to destroy the law. And that's how Kardec starts the book, which is, like I said, very sane, not only about Spiritism itself, because that's one of the goals of Kardec, is showing to everybody that we're not here to destroy the moral and ethics of whatever came before us, but we didn't come just to say the same things that was said before. And
Right.
that's exactly what we're going to talk or try to talk about tonight, because this saying I have not come to destroy the law is not Kardec's own creation. That's Jesus telling us,
Jesus. Yeah.
right? He comes and tells us, or the ones again, in the moral compass of the whole New Testament, which is the Sermon on the Mount, right at the beginning. Well, a little bit in the Sermon on the Mount, because he starts with the uh, um, how do we say it in English, Luis? The bem-aventuranças. I forgot the name.
Yeah.
So he comes with, blessed are those who,
Blessed
with
are.
the blessings, right? Blessed are those
Yes.
who, blessed are those two. And right after that, he says this, I have not come to destroy the law.
Hmm.
Why did he say that? And that's one of the things that we need to talk about is what is the law that he's talking about,
Exactly.
right? Because that's a big point. And right after he says that, he's going to come with some topics showing what the law that he's referring to is, and then he will say, but I say to you. So he puts a but
Yeah.
there, he
Yeah.
puts a however, he puts
Hmm.
like, I say differently. But what is interesting about this saying differently is that he's not destroying it, but he's going deeper in the law.
Hmm.
He's getting what it was said before and saying it again, but saying it in a way that makes it even harder to follow the law. So that he is, and like I like to say this, it's like when we are watching the Olympics, right? And we have the somersault, I guess. I can't remember the names of these sports, but it's the pole vault, I think, where you
Hmm.
come running with the
Right.
pole, and then you hit the ground, and then you jump over that
Jump. Yeah.
bar. So what Jesus is doing is, he's, as we say in English, he is raising the bar.
Yeah.
He is
Hmm.
raising the bar,
Yeah.
but he put the bar at such a high level that it looks to a certain point to be almost impossible to do it. But that's how he wants us to understand that there's a long way for us to go, that we can do, but we need, like we said the last time we were here a while ago, we need to practice, we need to do. We cannot be just sitting down waiting for our chance. No, we have to keep practicing, we have to be active, or be proactive, if some people
Proactive.
prefer,
Yeah.
because being proactive is being active before being active, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
preparing yourself to be prepared. So whenever it happens. So, what is this law then that he's talking about? Is he talking about the law of Moses, let's say, of the time, or the law of the Romans at the time, the law of Jerusalem, of the Jews? He's talking about our laws today. What is the law that he's talking about?
And
Of
understanding that makes a whole difference
yeah,
because you
yes, it
have an entire concept of what is said based on the law. If you focus on the wrong law, your entire interpretation is going to be wrong. So, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
exactly. I mean, we can go back in this country to the 60s, for example, or the 50s, where black people, right? Today we call them African American, but some of the black people prefer to be called black people instead of African American, because they don't refer to themselves as Africans.
Hmm.
It's just a color going to Africa. So they're black, it's a color, so there's nothing wrong with it. So they couldn't ride the bus with white people,
Yeah.
and that was the law. That was the law. Going a little further down behind, there were black people that could be enslaved, and that was the law,
Hmm.
right? So it is clear to us, at least in this sense, in these two examples, that this could not be the law that Jesus was talking about,
Because it changes.
because it changes. Yeah.
Mm.
The other thing, though, we have to even go further down is say, okay, so the law is what? The law is what's on the Bible. For the Jews at the time, there was no Bible. This name was
Right.
not invented there. It was the Torah, or the oral tradition, and the writings of the old prophets, and so on. So is it that law that Jesus is talking about? Because there are some weird things there too. There are
Hmm.
some very weird things on that law too. And is it about that law? It is about a book law that Jesus is talking about? And of course, if we just spend just a few seconds thinking about it, if we really want to think about it, not if we still want to have prejudice against other religions, or if we want to be fundamentalist, or only my book, the book that I follow, is the right one. So if I'm not going that path, and I want to really to think about it, I'm going to think about it and say, no, that's not the law that Jesus is talking about. because it cannot be, because this law that he's talking about, it needs to grasp, it needs to involve, it needs to fit everybody, everywhere, at any time,
Universal.
universally. It needs to be universal. It cannot be localized, because local costumes, local traditions will generate local laws,
Yeah. Tribal.
tribal laws, exactly. And then if we go a societal law, right, there's
Yeah.
big societies today, there we cannot even consider tribes anymore, but
Mhm.
they're that still kill based on the law. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, this country still kills based on the law. Not the whole country, but some
Some
states still
states.
have
Yeah.
the same the law itself. And what is interesting to me is that there's a law in the book that most of these people that still kill based on the law, there says, do not kill, or thou shalt not kill.
Not kill. Yeah.
Therefore, but the law, the local law, still kills. So it is very interesting to think about these things and then say, how and why are we still supporting this type of law? So Jesus was not supporting this type of law. And that's what is really interesting for us to go deeper in what he's saying, because, I can create a law and say, oh, Jesus says I didn't come to destroy the law. And then, so if he's not going to destroy the law, he's not going to destroy my law. But my law only applies to myself and not
Yeah.
everybody else. So he would
Personal.
not
Yeah.
support that law.
Yeah. It's personal.
It's personal, it's individual, it's not for the collective group of universal spirits
Hmm.
that are living here and that are living elsewhere, where we don't even know, right? What I
Right.
find, creating a parenthesis here to make maybe people think about this, right? I asked this one time in the Spiritist Center, and it says, hey, so if we go if we are reincarnated in a different planet for whatever reason, and am I gonna meet Jesus there? What book am I gonna read? Am I gonna read Matthew, John, Luke?
Yeah.
No. John, Luke, Matthew, and Mark, they were spirits that were incarnated in this earth in a specific time that generated the book that we call the New Testament. In a
Right.
different planet, in a different situation, it will be a different person. It will not be written the same way with the same words, but the idea behind the law will be the same. With
Mhm.
what is this law? Is the law, and we want to call it whatever we want to call it. Kardec divided the moral laws in the
Moral
spirits
laws.
book, right, in 10 different laws. And he even asks the spirits, right, said, is this like 10, this division is good? And what do they say? This looks like the 10 commandments, but the number, it doesn't matter. I mean, whatever, if you want to divide it in 5 or in 20, they are more specific and they're more wise than I am. They
Yeah.
say differently, but that's basically what they want to say. I mean, the division doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If it's good for us to understand how the moral laws work, that's perfect. I mean, take those 10, which is actually are 12, right? Because the last one is three laws, right? So
Three and
it
ten.
it is interesting to see how Kardec, even divided in 10, he said, no, 10 is not good, but I'm not going to create an 11 and a 12. So let's keep it 10, but let's put two together, three together, so that we can, try to show people that the number is not important. What's important is the understanding behind the law. So
Mhm.
when Jesus says, I didn't come to create, to destroy the law, he says, okay, here it is what you heard. And then he gives a few examples, which is also something, Luis, that always makes me think about. Kardec, when he talks about the subdivision of worlds, right? And then we talk about in this planetary transition that a lot of people talk about these days. So
Mhm.
we're in the world of regeneration, or the
Mhm.
divine worlds, happy worlds, whatever. He says divides in five parts. But this is, and I think that he says that at one point too. He says this is just a didactic or didactic
It's
division.
academic. Yeah, it's academic.
It's academic because where night starts and in day starts, right?
Yeah.
It's at 6 p.m. Well, if you're 6 p.m. here, it's so day, so much day that you say this is not night. And here in United States, when we go out, I remember first time I heard this, I was in school. I had an afternoon class, and then I'm leaving the afternoon class 3 p.m., 2 p.m., whatever it is, to go home. And then I say goodbye to my friends. That was as soon as I got here, 17, 18 years ago. And then my friends, it was like something that they used to say, that have a good night. What? At 2 p.m.? Why are you saying have a good night? But it's normal. Everybody says that here.
It's
It's like,
cultural. Yeah.
right? It's cultural. So what is night, right? What is night? What is day? It's the same thing. I mean, why are we still in the expiation world? Are we in regeneration? It doesn't matter. What matters is how are we in that process. I can be here but be upfront. I can be here but not be so ahead of how I think I was. So when Jesus in with Kardec, when he subdivides these laws or the law in these subdivisions, for us to understand how the moral laws work within our world, within our inner world, in our outer world, um, we understand that Kardec is getting closer to what Jesus was referring to as what laws he is not going to destroy. So
Mhm.
he's not going to destroy what is already really established. And it is what we hear in the Genesis, in the beginning of and God created the light,
Yeah.
and the light was good. So it's that concept of that light is good that Jesus is referring to, in my view, as what the law is, that he is not going to destroy.
Mhm.
What he's going to destroy is our perception of what the law is, because law changes.
Right.
Our perception of the law also changes. What we thought it was correct a few years ago, we might not see as correct now. And not because the law changed, but because I changed. And now I can see deeper in
Mm.
what was being said before. And that's why he says in several instances of the Sermon on the Mount, he says, listen to what was said. This was told to the old ones. This was told by the old ones. And then he cites a passage of the law. And then he goes and says, but I say this. And then he goes and gets that. He doesn't say wrong, but he says, this is where you should go. This is going deeper in that thought. This is going deeper in that law that you only were able to see a little light, because that's your capability of seeing is just through this very tiny
Yeah.
slit.
Yeah.
Jesus is just opening up and saying, okay, so here's a little more for you to see. Maybe later on you'll be able to see even more. And
Yeah.
that's where things start to get complicated, because once we start to see more, once we start to wise up, not only mentally or intellectually, but also, from feeling, from heart,
Uh-huh.
we start to say, oh my God, this is so tough. My jump will need to get so much better, so much better than what I'm jumping right now. So I don't know if you want to interrupt or not. I have a few more things to say,
No,
but
no, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll say something at the end.
okay. So um, when he says, I'm going to cite like one or two because we're not going to have time to talk about all of them, but he says, um, for example, we talked about do not murder, right? We talked about the Ten Commandments, and when it says one he says, you have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. And then he comes and says, but I tell you. So, what is he saying? And here's another thing that I'd like to point out. We're talking about Jesus. We're not talking about Mackenzie. We're not talking about Luis. We're not talking not even about Kardec or any other person that we know of. We're talking about Jesus. And to us, in reference to his teachings and to what he is and to what he came to do and talk to us, he is our guide and model.
Yeah, he
He
has
is the high.
authority. Yeah.
So he has authority. That's the word exactly. He has authority. So he is not just. It's like a teacher that comes into the
Hmm.
room. And you ask a question, and you ask a question. You say, "Oh, but that person," or "I heard this," and he might start by saying, "Oh, yeah, I heard this. This is this. This is this. But I will tell you this." So it's a person that has authority. If a person studied for a very long time, is a PhD or in that specific field, and you ask the person a question, you have to listen. Maybe you will not agree or whatever. I mean, it's our choice to agree or not agree, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the person having authority in that knowledge. And Jesus didn't only have authority in terms of knowing, but the biggest authority of it all, which was doing it. So he didn't come only to teach in terms of saying words. He came to do what he needed to do,
Yeah.
right? And his example is what's being set. And then, so when he says, "But I tell you differently," then we have to listen to what he says. And I'm going to read what he says about this murder. "But I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Whoever says, 'You fool,' will be subject to hellfire." So, what is Jesus saying here? He's not saying that, you're going to hell because of this. We can interpret it like in a surface with this. We can interpret. It's our freedom. We choose however we want to interpret. What is he saying though? He's saying that murder is wrong. But it's not just the murder of a person. He's talking about anger. If you're angry with someone, you're not following the law.
Hmm.
It's
It's
as
a lot
simple as
deeper.
this.
Yeah.
And you see, and that's why it's so hard for me. I mean, when I'm talking about this, I don't want to discourage anyone to be a Christian. I really don't. I don't, because I am a Christian. I like the teachings. I really like enjoy reading, but I know it is hard. I know it is
It
hard.
is. Yeah.
But I mean, if you want to become a doctor, how easy it is to become a doctor.
Yeah.
And not
At least.
because it's hard, you're gonna give up. If you really want to do it, you will do it. And it doesn't matter the profession. I mean, using a doctor, but it can be a lawyer, it can be whatever it is. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's not because it's hard. It does it make sense though, and that's when we okay. So, do I want to be a Christian?
Mm.
And that's the question. That's the big question. Do I want to be a graduate or of whatever school I want to be? Okay, so I'm gonna face it, and I'm gonna go to the end. And it might take a while. It might take longer than I expect, but I will do it. How many moms do we know that have one kid, two kids, and they have to leave school behind when
Yeah.
the kids are grown up or whatever, they go back and they finish their school.
Yeah.
It's if I want. It is if I want. So Jesus is inviting us to say, hey, I know it's not easy. But if you really want to be a disciple, if you really want to be a better person, if you really want to help this world become a better place, like I am doing, and you want to join me with this, let's do this. Let's do this. So I didn't come to destroy the law. So don't look at me as if I am a revolutionary just to be a revolutionary, to be different than any. No, I'm not. I'm here to show you that it is possible to do it, to show that we can do it. So
Mhm.
it's murder, it's wrong, What type of murder? I remember listening to this teacher of mine when I was young at the Spiritist Federation in Natal, and one day she said, and of course to the kid that I was, and she said to everybody in the same range. She says, "Oh, so the thing that you said to your friend out there, don't you think that what you said just killed his happiness? Just killed his his will to do what he wanted to do?" And everybody looked at it and said, "Yeah. So thou shalt not murder."
Yeah, that's a layer number two. It's
And it
another
says,
layer.
"Oh my God,
Yeah.
how many times have we killed the will of someone to do
Oh,
something that was good?"
all the time we do that.
So Jesus is actually inviting us to really think deep on these things. And so when he says, "I have not come to destroy the law," he's saying, "I came to show you how deep this law goes, and
Yeah.
that you need to go step by step. But one day you will get to that point. First, you don't murder physically, which we still
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
But if you don't do it anymore, go to the next step and don't murder other things that you don't need, you should not be murdering."
Right,
And
being
then,
aggressive. Yeah.
so just to cite another one that I find interesting, because it brings something else that I want to say at the end. It says, "You have heard that it was said," that's chapter 5 of Matthew, item verse 43. "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy." We all, heard this before in spiritist talks or whatever. We
Hmm.
now, thou shalt not love your, love your neighbor as you love yourself. He will say later, and then in that he says, "and hate your enemy." And then he says, "But I tell you once again, love your enemies." And we have an item on the Gospel according to Spiritism that talks about this, right?
Right.
"And pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? If I do good to those people who do good to me, we're at the same level."
Yeah.
And it's not wrong, and we should be doing it. But if I don't love the other one who doesn't love me, if I do the same, am I not the same as as the other
Yeah.
person anyways? So, but what I find interesting in this, Louise, and this is just like to open up a can of worms or Pandora's box here,
Uh-huh.
right? When you get to the Bible and you go and you check what Jesus says, if you get a good Bible, you see that they put like footnotes,
Yeah.
and then they point on the footnotes where it was said before, what Jesus is referring to. So you can go back and check in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, Numbers, whatever, get books in the past. And in this saying, what I find very interesting is that love your neighbor, and you press it, and then it will say where it was. It's Leviticus 19:18. So it was taught in the Old Testament. So
Hmm.
this is not a Jesus teaching. This is the law teaching, right?
He's
But
reinforced. Yeah.
yeah, he's reinforcing. But then the next sentence that he says is, "and hate your enemy." So he's saying that he heard that. He's saying that this was being taught. But what
Hmm.
is interesting is that this "hate your enemy," there's no footnotes to it. It is not said in the Old Testament. And what researchers found after the um, the manuscripts of the Dead Sea Scrolls were
Hmm.
found, there was this community of people that followed Judaism, and in some of these manuscripts, they were saying or kind of teaching that there would be the enemy of light, and that they should fight and hate this enemy of light. So some people that are studying these manuscripts are say that that's where Jesus probably heard these teachings from? Because
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
not on the law. But
It was
he was
it was maybe a verbal thing running around from
exactly,
it came from the Essenes. Yeah.
yeah. And so he was listening to everything that was around to teach us and people at the time based on the what they were living around. So he's not disconnected from reality. He's connected to what's going on around him. And he says, hey, look, pay attention. That's what you've been hearing. But I'm going to say, I'm telling you, love your neighbors is important, but loving your enemies is also important.
Mm-hmm.
Don't listen to what people are trying to say that if you love your neighbor, you hate your enemy. No, you're
Yeah.
not going to be different than your enemy if you hate them. So he, once again, he grabs the bar that was right here, and maybe I was already like being able to cross it with just like one step. Now he picks up the
Yeah.
bar and then puts it
All
here.
the way up. Yeah.
Now I can't just like cruise through it. No, I have to work hard. So
Yeah.
being a Christian, it is tough. It is worth being a Christian. It is challenging, and maybe because it is challenging, once we realize we were able to achieve certain goals, personal inner goals, we say, oh, that's good that I'm doing this. So this is an introduction. I'm like Luis said in the other times, and he probably says it all the time. 30 minutes is just an introduction. There's so much more in this section of with Jesus and the law, and Jesus and these I say, I shall say, the old ones did this. We could be talking here for hours, but it's time, Louise. I'm sorry to have extended a
No,
little
no,
bit.
no. That's good. It's necessary. I'm sure the audience, just like me, we get thrilled with things like this and detailed studies like this, because that's where the knowledge comes from going in, from diving in each sentence or each phrase and pulling off the real meaning. So, yeah, absolutely beautiful and brilliant. So, thank you, Mackenzie, once again for accepting the invitation. And obviously, we're going to be here more times talking about different things.
That's true.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm always here. Love being here with you, being part of Kardec Radio. Once again, it's awesome to be here, just spreading the word, spreading the love.
And spreading the law too.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Okay.
true.
All right. Thank you so much for following us here at Kardec Radio, Spiritism, a closer look. We will be here next week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.